As men, especially as doctors, sometimes we hyper-focus on our career, neglecting other facets of our lives. But that is about to change. This is Dads Before Doctors. Some physicians claim their family is their top priority, but their lives tell a very different story. We'll help each other become family men who are doctors rather than doctors who have families. If it's health, wealth and legacy, emotional well-being, parenting, professional goals, or marriage, we're talking about it. Thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe. This is Dads Before Doctors, and this is your host, Adam Broussard, MD.
All right, welcome back to Dads Before Doctors podcast. Today, we're joined by Dr. Bradley Blanc. He's host of the podcast Physician Guide to Doctoring, an ENT physician, and husband and father of 3 young kids. Welcome, Brad.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam. I've been looking forward to this.
All right, me too. It's great to connect. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background other than my brief introduction, and maybe even a little bit how you grew up? And
no, you covered it all. There's really not much more to me than that. It's a pretty shallow existence. No, I grew up on Long Island. Middle upper class upbringing on Long Island. So as a Jewish kid growing up on Long Island, the dream of becoming a doctor seemed a little far-fetched, because that never happens, right? We're definitely underrepresented. No, not at all. I am the first physician in my family, but it's almost like a stereotype. We've got a couple of options: doctor, lawyer, accountant. And so there was a multiple choice test, and I picked doctor.
There you go.
But no, I hadn't really considered being a doctor until college. I didn't start out as pre-med, although I was bio, and then made the decision kind of late. And here I am practicing medicine next to the giant mall on Long Island. It's what I always dreamed of, back at home near the mall. But it's great. It's great. I kid, but I love my practice. I love where I live. I love my neighborhood. It's great for the kids, and life is challenging, but this is where I wanted to be.
Awesome. So growing up, young Jewish guy in Long Island, what you chose your multiple choice. So was there a lot of pressure at home to become one of those options, to become a doctor, or you kind of were able to blaze your own path?
So there was always pressure to succeed. And actually, this is being a parenting podcast. It would be a good place to talk about it. My wife and I had very different upbringings in this regard, in that for my brother and I, there was always the pressure to succeed. Like, if you're successful, everything will be okay. If you're not successful, everything falls apart. So you had to be the top of the class. You had to do all the school activities. And then if you got into a top college, then everything would be okay. So my brother and I both got into top colleges. And as it turns out, not everything falls into place once that happens. You need to keep working. The goalpost keeps moving and moving and moving. But there was always ingrained in us this need to succeed. You have to be active in everything. You have to be the best. And my wife's upbringing was very different. It was, you should be happy. Doing this after school activity doesn't make you happy, then don't do it. Playing the sport doesn't make you happy, then don't do it. Just don't, you should be happy. And so we're discussing how we're going to find that happy medium with our kids. Like, no, it's not okay to start something and just quit in the middle, especially if you were the one that decided to do it. But at the same time, we don't need to, I picture it like holding someone's head against like a belt sander, like, you're going to succeed, and that's, so, there's somewhere in between that we have to figure out.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of physicians kind of are in that, mindset that you had, that it's just another thing to achieve, another thing that we need to check off. And you have to get straight A's in high school to get into a good college, to get into a good med school, to get into a good residency. And then we're just on that, conveyor belt, I guess, or to, once we become attendings, then got to become assistant professor, associate professor, or partner in your private practice. And it's tough to kind of step off. So I think that's great to have a little different upbringings to kind of have those conversations at home. My wife and I both had, similar upbringings to you and your wife, that we were pretty different. So how old are your kids now?
I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5.5-year-old.
So right in the thick of things.
Yeah, it is hard. It is hard, especially since the youngest was born a couple of months before the pandemic started. And so we were planning on having help, right? My wife's European, so her family's not really around much to help. Although when things shut down, initially one of her sisters who lives in Philadelphia actually came to live with us. We're like, everything's shutting down. If you're going to come stay with us, you're going to be locked in your apartment by yourself for who knows how long, or come live with us for a few months until things relax. And she got on an Uber or got on a train and was like, oh my God, okay, I'm coming. And then she was able to help with the kids initially when things really locked down. But once things relaxed a little, we still didn't have any help. So it was really hard.
We have similar age. Our oldest son's 4, and our younger one, I guess he's like 19 months. So he was born in July, right after the pandemic. And like, I couldn't go to most of the OB appointments. I couldn't, only I could go to the hospital for his birth. So I know the struggle.
Yeah, it's rough. It takes a village, but when you're on quarantine, when you're on lockdown, the village is stuck in their houses, unable to help.
Yeah. And we were chatting before about, travel with young kids, and our oldest son traveled a lot prior to COVID because we were living, far away from family, but our youngest one hasn't gone anywhere. So every time we get in the car for more than 15 minutes, he is not a happy camper. So we've got about a 12-hour drive coming up in July. So we'll see how that goes.
I'm sorry, how many hours?
About 12 hours.
Wow, that is rough. Yeah, we just went on a, New York traffic. It should have been a 2.5-hour drive, but it was a 4-hour drive. And the youngest on the way there threw up 3 times. And we're like, oh God, he gets car sick. Oh, but thankfully the vomiting was followed by diarrhea. So, phew, diarrhea. He just had some stomach bug that he gave to one of his brothers. So, yeah.
The joys of parenting young kids.
Yeah. That cleaning up the vomit out of the car seat in the freezing cold, pulling over, stripping him down. And one of his brothers, maybe I shouldn't say this stuff publicly. It's going to haunt these kids forever. But because there are 3 of them, there's some anonymity. Throws up at the sight of vomit, as many people do. And so we're like, no, don't hold it in, look away, don't smell it, look away, think of something else, play your video games, don't throw up too. We don't need more puke in this car. Yes, the joys of parenting.
So what's a great father or a great physician father to you? How would you define that?
Yeah, so I think our generation is a little different than the previous generation in that we're less defined by our occupation, and therefore maybe not as committed to it is the wrong way to put it, but we're less willing to make sacrifices for our family. And so I think a great physician father is someone who puts their family first.
Yeah. And that's our goal. That's our goal with, Dads for Doctors, is that we can, take a step back from, like I said, we've always been focused so much on, getting through the medical circus of jumping through hoop after hoop, that we kind of lose sight of, the relationships with our, spouses, our family, our kids, and taking that step back to focus on not only, those relationships, but our relationship with ourselves, even, that we kind of lose sight on sometimes too. And that it's okay to, take that time for your health and your mental well-being and whatnot too.
Yeah, the hospital doesn't love you back, but you know what? Your kids do. Your spouse does. But you also need to make it's the balance between sacrificing for your kids and putting your kids first, but also not putting yourself last.
Mm-hmm.
You have to. You're not a terrible parent if you know what you get home late from work because you stopped off to go to the gym. I mean, don't do that all the time, but you have to do some things to yourself for yourself. Otherwise, you're going to start to fray, and you're not going to be the best parent you can be.
Exactly. Yeah, no
you
doubt.
Need to find the balance between, making sacrifices for yourself. You can't do whatever you want whenever you want. There are life forms depending on you. But at the same time, if you leave nothing for yourself, you're not the best parent for them.
Yeah, if you can't, relieve that stress and at the gym, and you come home mad at your patient or the hospital administrators or whatever, you're going to end up taking it out of your kids or your wife or whoever.
And they need to see that you have outside interests. Like if you're a more interesting person, they're going to be more interesting people. Something I tell my patients all the time, for the ones who smoke, I say, well, they're like, yeah, but my kids know that they're not allowed. Well, kids are awful at doing what you tell them to, but amazing at doing what you do. And so, setting a good example by having outside interests, by having relationships with your friends, by having a good relationship with your spouse. I think these are things that you're showing them by example. And at the same time, you're
Mm-hmm.
filling your own cup. I don't know, maybe I'm just rationalizing hanging out with my friends. That could also be what's happening too. And I'm not being a good parent.
It's amazing what they pick up on, like in things that you're not even talking to them about, or, just what they see. And they'll, at least in my experience, my oldest one's only 4, and the things he will come back with, and you're like, oh, you saw that, or like you were kind of listening to me while you were, throwing your tantrum or whatever. So it's
funny when they imitate your mannerisms.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that in the 4-year-old? Like either you or your wife will have certain things that you tend to say over and over again, and they'll incorporate that into their speech. So you don't even realize you do it until they're repeating it back. Like my middle one says, you see. And then I realize now that I'm the one who says that all the time.
The baby will even like walk like me sometimes. It's like, where did this come from? You just learned how to walk. How are you doing this? So I know I'll hold my arms behind my back sometimes, and he started doing it recently. I was like, okay.
Oh, that's funny. That's super cute.
So physician guide to doctoring. So what's this all about?
I see you're a longtime listener of the podcast. So I've been doing it for like 3.5 years now. I have over 170 episodes. And the point of it was I was struggling sometimes with interactions with my patients and staying on time. So like there's this, one thing that I was taught in medical school was if you sit down, it will seem longer to the patient and they'll find it more fulfilling than if you're standing up. Mm-hmm. Same amount of time, all you have to do is sit down. So I was wondering if there are other things like that I can do so that the patients really feel more comfortable with the visit and confident that we covered everything, but not giving them an inordinate amount of time. Because then you fall behind schedule, you're inefficient, right? Then the angry people in the waiting room. So how can we do things? How can we communicate effectively and efficiently? So there are a bunch of experts out there. How do I get them on the phone? How do I talk to them? How do I ask them questions? Start a podcast. So I started a podcast. So a lot of the stuff that I cover in the podcast are soft skills, but it actually expanded from there because I had other questions I wanted to ask. And something for the physician audience in case they're interested. I mean, one thing I recommend is that you don't start a podcast because Adam, you and I don't need more competition in this space. So don't start a podcast. Just listen to ours. But if you do, recognize that you're surrounded by experts, like the people you went to college with, the people that you went to medical school with, the people that you did residency with, fellowship with. These are all people that are now experts in whatever field they're in, and you can call on them to be interviewed and maybe do a guest post on your blog about something that you're wondering about. You have access to a ton of experts, and then there's a whole physician community online and beyond. So once you have a podcast, once you have a platform, you can actually email strangers. Someone that I reached out to and I was shocked that I got a call back from was BJ Fogg, who's kind of the godfather of habit development. And we did 2 episodes on how physicians can help their patients to develop habits. Because, right, I hear all these complaints. Oh, we don't learn enough nutrition in medical school. What do you mean we don't learn enough nutrition? Eat more fruits and vegetables. Don't eat a ton of ice cream and pizza. It's not that complicated. Right. If you're an Olympic athlete and you need to get super granular, fine. That's one thing. But for the overwhelming majority of the population, it's not about understanding the nuances of nutrition. It's about habit development. So I got him on the phone and we spoke a ton about how we can help our patients to develop better habits. So it's those types of soft skills that I talk about on the podcast, and a lot of it actually translates to parenting, right? Like being a good listener. How do your kids know that you're a good listener? One thing that I've taken away from it was when your kids are talking to you, crouch down so you're on eye level with them, right? So you're not this big menacing figure, but rather you're with them, and then they're even more aware that you're with them, and then you're less likely to be distracted by something that's on eye level like the TV. So you get down with them, you get close to them so they know that you're really listening. So a lot of these soft skills apply to parenting as well.
Yeah, it's amazing, the simple things that completely can transform the relationship that you have with the patients. I'm an anesthesiologist, so I have, a very brief period of time that I get to gain these patients' trust, and I do pediatric anesthesia. So I'm not only gaining the child's trust, but the parent's trust. I'm about to take their child away to essentially the brink of death and back. And I've, get to talk to them for, a minute or two. So kind of picking up on some of those, soft skills that, like you said, really don't go over. They want to make sure that you can take an H&P and get all the right information, but they don't really talk about how to, connect that patient. And that's what you always hear, these patients complain, oh, the doctor made me wait, and then they only gave me 10 minutes and they weren't listening to me. So, I think this is huge to help with all physicians and all specialties.
Yeah. In your particular situation, one thing that I would, not that you asked me for advice, but I'm going to give unsolicited advice anyway, would be, the doctor wasn't listening. And it's not about listening. It's about being present. And that's two different things, because you can be listening, but still not fully present. Like you can get all of the information that you need while you're checking all the boxes that you need to check off on Epic. Right. But you should be present when they're talking to you. And that means you're not thinking about, dropping your kid off at school. You're not thinking about anything else. You're not on Epic. You are looking at them and you are listening to them. So they can tell if you're distracted or not. And the other thing is nonverbal cues. Nonverbal cues, the really two different camps. Nonverbal cues, you need to exude interest and authority. And interest is with your facial expressions, right? Primarily your brows. So like not nodding, that's not going to make them think that you're paying attention. But like, wrinkling your brow, furrowing your brow, squinting your eyes, like as they're talking to you, makes it look like you're paying attention. Now, they can also tell if you're just making weird eyes and actually distracted. So you actually have to be paying attention. But if you've got a blank expression on your face, you might be paying attention, but it doesn't look like it. So you have to look like it too. So, concentrate on just the upper half of your face, which is great because we've got masks on. So, they can't see the lower half of your face. So interest. And the other thing is authority. So authority is demonstrated with your vocal tonality. So the way that you're talking about giving the anesthesia and what's going to happen, right? The cadence of your speech, the volume of the speech, the confidence of your speech, these things are what exude authority. So interest in your facial expressions and authority in your vocal tonality. So this is what we talk about on the podcast, right? These little things that if you practice them and practice them with your kids, right? Practice them with your friends in the neighborhood. So it'll work. It'll help you be a better parent. And then it'll translate to a skill at work. And these are not a big deal to do, but they can be tremendous in these relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the kids pick up on it big time too. Like you can be watching them play or whatever, but I mean, my son will be like, "Dad, eyes over here." It's like, "Son, I'm staring at you." But I mean, they can even tell like when you're not all there. And that's all they want. Like that's the big thing. Like you can physically be present at their t-ball game or at whatever, their school play, but like they'll pick up like if you weren't paying attention. Because as soon as you look down at your phone is when they're gonna like go score a goal.
That's when they're gonna look. That's when they're gonna know. Yeah. But the t-ball games. And they're just sitting in the dugout for like an hour. You're not even watching them. But nope. If you're on your phone, you're not interested in what they're doing, and then it makes them question how important they are. Right? It can be a big deal. So yes. Yeah. Agreed.
So I was actually this morning listening to another podcast of one of Chris Voss's head trainers on negotiation that, former FBI.
I invited him and they said no. So I can't get it.
But, really cool. Just like repeating back things that people said and giving them time. And if they're, start getting angry, like, going back and being like, look, clearly we're not, I'm not meeting you. Like, what is it that I can, help you with? Because sometimes when we run down the list of problems or whatever, like what they come from, what they say may not be what they really, are looking for. When our kids, start having a meltdown because of XYZ, it's probably not about the cup of juice. It's probably because they're tired or because, you weren't paying attention earlier or you weren't paying attention and they just want attention. So, kind of taking a step back and being curious about why they're, in that state, is big.
Yeah. So I see a lot of kids in my practice. So I do a lot of TNAs and tubes. And, when the kids are waking up from anesthesia, sometimes they're hysterical. And something that I learned from parenting podcasts like yours is a lot of times you just have to be there calm in the storm. Mm-hmm. So they've got all these emotions. They're freaking out. They're losing it. They're melting down. And, it's not necessary to solve the problem, but rather be there calm in the storm. So when these kids are waking up from anesthesia and they're wild and they're confused and they're uncomfortable, like the parent, like you can't necessarily fix it. They will calm down, but your role is to be there calm in the storm. And it's the same thing with parenting. It's if they're freaking out and it makes you freak out and, oh my God, then they're going to learn that that's an appropriate way to respond. And that's not what we want to teach them, right? They learn by seeing, not by what we tell them. You got to calm down, but you're not calm. So your role in that situation is to be there calm in the storm. And I find that really helpful for me because in a lot of those situations, you're not sure what to do. And a lot of the times there's nothing to do except just be there for them and be there calm.
Absolutely. And there's actually, pediatric anesthesia study that I think they put like headphones on the kids with like their mom or whatever, just talking to them calmly. And there's less like emergence delirium with that. So definitely works. And, when you're the role model and you're freaking out with your kids because they're freaking out, like you're clearly setting a precedence for them to do it again.
Yep. So. Yep. This is okay behavior, right? That's what you're telling them.
Mm-hmm. And like, how do you're like screaming at them to be calm. And, you as an adult can't control your emotions, how are you expecting the small child to control their emotions just because you're telling them to? So
yeah,
I think that's a great lesson to learn, both, in doctoring and in parenting.
Yeah. Screaming back at that patient that's screaming is not the way to handle the disgruntled patient. I've been waiting here for an hour. I know you've been waiting here for an hour. I've been trying to move as fast as I can. Whoa, what? Yeah, that's not that's not going to de-escalate the situation.
Yeah. But I think, on the other side, you have to, be able to give yourself that grace, because, maybe they were waiting because you needed more time with that prior patient, and to give them the best care. So being able to calmly say, like, look, like, this was a more complicated patient, I gave them time so that I can give you time, later. And then being able to move on and give yourself, I guess, grace to accept, like, they're angry at me and you can't control, how they're feeling, but not go into that next appointment knowing that person just screamed at you, that, you still have to give them your attention and your time to help them with their problem.
Yeah, you said give yourself some grace. So it made me think of two different things. One is, I don't want the audience to get the thought that the idea that I am some Zen master father that doesn't yell at his kids. I come from a long line of yellers, and I definitely yell. One of the reasons I'll yell is because I said your name 5 times and I have no idea if you heard me because you didn't turn to look at me or say, yes, Dad. So my voice escalates quickly. And that might not be the right thing to do, but that's still what happens, and I'm not an awful father because sometimes I yell. And I think for all the parents out there, humans lose patience. You have a finite supply of patience. You're going to lose it. You're going to run out, and you're not going to be the ideal picture perfect Instagram parent sometimes. Okay. Yeah. And it's fine as long as you keep working at it. Parenting is an iterative process. And the same thing with the patients. Like, I used to picture what was going through their heads as they were waiting in the waiting room, getting angrier and angrier at me, as if each one was going to come in saying, what took so long? I've been waiting forever. And then often what happens is they come in the room and they're like, no, I understand. This happens. Yeah. I get it. So not every patient is going to come in. So don't let it bother you. And when the patient does, you know what? It happens. You're doing your best.
Yeah.
Is there something you could have done differently to make the wait time? Or could your staff have communicated better with the patient or could you have communicated better with your staff that you wanted them to let the patient know? Because often that's what it comes down to. Let them know that they're next. Let them know that there are 2 patients ahead of them. Let them know that the doctor's running X minutes behind. And you're not sure how much longer the wait's going to be, but the more information you can give them, the better. So what can you learn from that experience? So yeah, they had a bad time, and it stinks, but you know what? Give yourself some grace. You're human. You got to pay attention to the patients that are in front of you. And is there anything that you could have learned from it to make that less likely to happen again?
Luckily, both kids and patients give you loads of opportunities to practice staying calm and not losing your cool. So if you do, one time, you get probably 10 minutes later, you're going to get another opportunity to try not to lose your cool when they're not responding to you, or when they, pull the dog's tail or whatever, the next little thing is. So
and for the kids, it's a good opportunity to apologize. Mm-hmm. And so they can recognize that, you make mistakes too.
Yeah.
So they don't think you're perfect, because they're not perfect, and they hear it all the time. All the time they're hearing what they did wrong. What they did. Nope, you got that math problem wrong. Nope, that's not how that word's pronounced. Nope, you're not supposed to touch that. Nope, you're not supposed to stick that in your mouth. Right? Like constantly. It's like being a resident, right? You rarely get praise. I mean, all right, fine. My kids get praise. We give a lot of praise, but you don't necessarily register the praise as much as you register and remember the times you were were criticized and corrected. So if they can see that you're fallible and you acknowledge that you're fallible and you apologize from your mistakes, you're making mistakes, it helps them also recognize that you're in the trenches with them trying to figure all this stuff out together rather than that you know it all. Have you seen The Adam Project yet?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that movie, that Ryan Reynolds movie about him being from the future and coming back in time.
No.
I cried a lot during a Ryan Reynolds action movie, and that's okay because it's all about his relationship with his father. Gosh, where was I going with this? Oh, the fallibility of the dad, and the dad, his wife pointed it out to him. He pointed it out to him so he could course correct, and recognizing that we're there with them with our flaws, trying to figure it out together.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big thing, like just that growth mindset that when you do quote unquote fail, whether it's, yelling at your kids when you don't want to, or, trying to start a new business or whatever, like being able to realize that you're not a failure because of that it's just a learning opportunity to do better in the future, so that the next time you're in that same situation, you can act differently. And, the not being like, well, I'm just a bad dad, I'm just going to continue yelling at my kids, or, I'm a poor business person.
Exactly. It's iterative. You try it again. You try something different. Oh, actually, I lost my train of thought, but now I remember why I brought up the Adam Project, because the mom, what happens is, and you find this out, I'm not spoiling the movie, so as a kid, Ryan Reynolds' dad dies in a car accident. And what he later tells his mom is that she needs to let child him know that she's grieving too, because she feels like she needs to be strong for her kid and hold it all together. And he said the better thing to do is let him know that she's grieving too. So I thought that was an action movie, but I thought that was so insightful. Like, our kids need to know that we're human too, and we're there with them. And like you said, it's if you get it wrong, you'll have plenty of opportunities to course correct and try again, and then get it wrong again, and then try again.
Yeah, thankfully, plenty of opportunities. But this is exactly why, I started Dads for Doctors, just being able to talk about some of these things that we don't talk about at the hospital with our colleagues, seeing other dads going through the same things. And if we can take one little piece of advice from, this conversation, or, whether it's in our practice or in our parenting at home or relationship with our spouse, like just being able to have these conversations and to share these conversations with the, other physician dads and other professionals. So really appreciate you taking this time to chat with us. Is there any parting words that you have for the listeners?
Yeah, I need to, if you're listening to this podcast, then you're a good dad, right? Because you're listening because you want to be better. You want to hear the experiences of other dads that are in your situation, other physician fathers, and you want to try and figure out how to be better. And if you're doing that, that tells me that you're a good dad. Now, we can always be better, right? We need to work on it. We need to work on being better, but acknowledging that and owning it. I'm a good dad. I'm a good dad. I could be better, and I'm going to try and be better, but I'm okay.
Absolutely.
And also check out my podcast, physiciansguidetodoctoring.com, or look me up on any podcast player, Bradley Block, or Physician's Guide to Doctoring. That too.
Awesome. That was the next question. I really appreciate you joining us, Bradley, and look forward to hearing more of your episodes and learning more. And hope everyone connects with you and can learn to be a better doctor in the process.
Thanks a lot for having me, Adam. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Dads Before Doctors podcast. family men who are doctors rather than doctors who have families. In an evolving and ever fast-paced world, we cannot lose sight of our real priorities. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had fun. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and tell a friend about the show. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at dadsbeforedoctors.com. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email adam@dadsbeforedoctors.com. And find us on Facebook and Instagram at Dads Before Doctors. Remember, the host of this show is not your doctor, your coach, or your financial advisor. This show is strictly for entertainment. Till next time, this is Dads Before Doctors, signing off.